Jeff, you want
Well,
to?
I was going to ask, for the benefit of the congregations involved, if you'll tell us who you are and what you're doing, and give them kind of a place to start as we hear from you. This will be on a Sunday morning, so let us know who you are and maybe even how you found yourself to be where you are. You're a long way from New Mexico.
Yeah, it's true. So I'm Robert Gamble. Um, I am the child of I'm a Navy officer. I grew up in Bermuda, Florida, Puerto Rico, and California. I went to the Coast Guard Academy and got a degree there at the Coast Guard Academy and spent 5 years as an officer in the Coast Guard. And as I joke all the time, after being in the Coast Guard and pastor of churches and now in Ukraine, I'm still in the life-saving business. So can't seem to get away from that.
Yeah.
Um, so I was the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Daytona Beach for 9 years, and near the end of that time in 2005, I had a sabbatical and I went to Ukraine. I'll just tell you briefly why I went to Ukraine. At that time, I was involved with starting a Hungarian congregation in my church. I met Hungarians in Daytona Beach, Eastern Europeans, and I really enjoyed these people. I went to Hungary. I saw Eastern Europe, which is different than Western Europe. So I had this introduction to Eastern Europe. At the same time, I was running trips to Nicaragua during the summer to work. The deal was work for a week in the orphanage, and I give you a week of surfing. So I'm a surfer. So that's how I get young people to go to Nicaragua and work in an orphanage. um, and and that's because I was in Nicaragua during the '80s in the war, and the war was there. But I went back in the '90s, not for a political reason, but to help kids in orphanages. So I was interested in orphans, and I was interested in Eastern Europe. And when I got the sabbatical, I happened to meet a guy on the fantail of a casino cruise ship going out of Port Canaveral, which it happens to be the port I was stationed at on a Coast Guard cutter back in the '70s. So, I was eager to kind of see the land from the sea, and I didn't care about gambling, and I lost $20 already. So I was talking to some stranger, complete stranger, about about my work, about Nicaragua, and he said, "Well, wait a minute. If you want to help orphans, you got to go to Ukraine. There's 80,000." And he happened to be a Florida lawyer who was doing adoptions out of Ukraine. So that stuck in my head, and when I came to decide about what to do about the sabbatical, I thought, well, Eastern Europe, orphans, I'll go to Ukraine. And so I did. And in that time, in August, September of 2005, in my time in Ukraine, I saw not kids in orphanages. I wasn't able to even get in an orphanage. I just saw thousands of street kids. They were living underneath buildings down in the. I mean, I didn't see thousands. I saw a lot, and there were thousands living on the streets in those years. That's exactly 15 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. And if you do the math, and go backwards, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, it was a extremely difficult time economically for all those countries. And over there, sometimes that means there's not much money, but there's always money for alcohol or vodka, and someone's going to get abused, and it's not going to be the man in the house. And so, unfortunately, there was a lot of child abuse by neglect or by various things in those early years. And when I showed up, those kids were all teenagers. And when they're teens, they left home, went to the street, or they were given to an orphanage by a single parent, which happens a lot over there. And they left the orphanage and went to the streets. So anyway, but in time, that population of street kids dwindled down to practically nobody, no kids on the street by 2010. And by that time, we had already begun to work in orphanages with teams. An idea was to get kids to stay and not to leave for the streets. And then we got the bright idea of training foster families to take kids from orphanages. We're always like looking for what's the source of the problem. And we knew that a child in a family was better than an orphanage. And for a long time, I was like kind of take it or leave it with the orphanages, but I finally decided to myself that it was the institutionalization of children is not proper, not good. And so we were doing that. By 2014, the war began. We started to train teenagers in peacemaking techniques. We did that with the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. They paid for the dormitories and food, and I paid the staff to teach. And this was a really rigorous. They would meet 3 times for uh, for 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 like 4 days each in Kiev, and it was like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, learning techniques to work with groups of people to resolve conflict and examining your own prejudices. Uh, all that continued with foster family training. We were doing camps for families displaced by the war. We were doing camps for foster families in the summertime. But COVID hit and slowed everything down. Um, and as COVID was winding out, or it's really not gone, obviously right now, but um, when the invasion began, that changed everything, and we had to drop all those programs. And I moved from Odessa, where my home base was, to Ismail, and shifted to working with families displaced by the war. So there may be a point at which we go back to training foster families, but I kind of doubt it because now the amount of work we're looking at in terms of helping these families, in terms of one day rebuilding in Ukraine, all that, this is where we are going to be working. So I've learned a lot. Families essentially come to the West. They come to our city of Ismail. They go to social services, you call it that, and they uh, get a stipend from the government if they sign up or sign in. And on the door is a note that says, if you want further help, call this number. And it's the cell phone of our program manager. So every weekend we meet families at grocery stores and we say, get what you need, and we pay for it. These are new families, or sometimes they're families that have some disabilities. A blind woman, somebody with special needs children, we help them too as well. But this is how we meet families. So when the invasion first began and people first began coming, we were meeting families every day, a couple of times a day in grocery stores. But we kept track of who the names of these families and their phone numbers and stuff like that. So when the invasion began the end of February, by like all through March and April, we were doing this. Then we would start thinking about a camp in the summer. And so with that, all those names, we started we planned 2 camps. I call them camps. Uh, they're a week at an old Soviet resort, which is just a big, ugly building near the beach. Um, and it's inexpensive. And so then we had 100 people because we took 2 groups of 50. And when they came back from that summer, we then decided I pushed for it. Let's find buildings to rent. Let's rent something for sports and something for creative activities. And so we did. And we called all those people and invited them to come. And we started, figuring out what to do. And we worked our way in terms of, first of all, helping with things like handcrafts, um, singing, group work, therapy work with mothers, and we kept refining it and refining it. Now we've got a music club. We had instruments too, and we do a lot of singing and make a lot of music. We are always like thinking about creativity. It's kind of seems like if you look at Abraham Maslow's pyramid, And, at the bottom, you got these basic needs and security and safety and so forth. And you move on up to, community or friendships, relationships, and you're going to get to the top there, and think about self actualization. But really, at the top, it's kind of this place where people feel the need then to create, and you can also stand that thing on its head and start beginning with creativity and work the other way too. But we saw these people move from being almost kind of catatonic, to functioning to really functioning well, um, and and we just kept tuning what we would do to see and make that happen for them. Um, the Body Keeps Score is a important book for us. Um, Basically it says that trauma damages you emotionally and then or physically and then as well, and but it also works backwards. So what you do physically helps you heal from trauma. And the most dramatic example of that is when you put somebody in the water. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm a surfer, so granted, I've got to, I lean that way anyway. But when some of these kids were, think about this, 2 to 6 weeks on the basement of a building, while upstairs there's mortar fire, tank fire, there's rockets hitting, all the time. What does that do to a child? But they get you get in the water and you give them goggles and they go under, and it's silent. You can imagine the kind of dramatic healing that can come from that experience. So seeing kids in the water, playing in the water with their mothers, um, that's just been fantastic for these people. So now we're up to now having 3 camps this summer. 150 people will go to Bulgaria for this kind of experience. Um, so that kind of, like, I guess that's an overview of how I started, how we started when the war came, and what we are doing at this time.
That's
Wow.
kind of incredible, Bob.
Yeah. 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 Well, I was going to ask, how has your organization goals changed due to the war? But I think you covered that pretty well.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I will tell you the next step for us. And I'm reading a book called Between Two Kingdoms. It's a really good book. It's about a woman who survived cancer. And she writes a column for the New York Times, and that's become a well-known speaker now. But she says something very important, because that book, it's divided into 2 parts. And there's a time when she has cancer, and there's a time after. And she said that the really difficult work begins after. And so we're already thinking ahead to when this war ends. I mean, what's that going to be like for these people? Because then you're talking about, you're not going to have those endorphins and adrenaline because there's a war going on here. You're gonna go. Are you gonna go home? What are you gonna do? And one way that we believe we're gonna succeed with this is that we're trying to place kids in educational universities and schools in the States. We got 4 kids that can go to college. We're trying to place them. There's a program called Global Student Haven Initiative, where some really good colleges like Dartmouth and Pomona and NYU and Williams and Smith, and Bowdoin in Maine give a free ride to Ukrainian students.
Mm.
And so if they can qualify for those schools, then that'll be good. We're trying to place kids in 10th grade and high school, because then there'll be this kind of like future ahead for that family that's being kind of led by our child's in school in the States, And so this is a really, really hopeful thing for us. And Plus, it'll help really now because, frankly, it's been difficult to go to school with. We get 3 air raids a day here, or sometimes 2 air raids a day. We haven't been hit by drones since the last fall, but then they just completely destroyed the ports outside the window here. Um, Near me. So they destroyed the port offices and the commercial offices too at the port. But still, when the air raid goes off, by law, kids go down to their shelters, and so they go underground or to these shelters, and a lot of times school ends there. Um, they're getting creative in some other cities in Ukraine. I think it's Kharkiv, where they've taken the subway system and turned it into an educational facility. Instead of all those glass shops where you buy trinkets and garbage, they're all classrooms now. Um, 5 subway stations in Kharkiv are that way. That's a big university town, by the way, too. So anyway, going to school in the States, of course, would just be a wonderful thing for any child. But that's just part of what we're trying to think about down the road.
Mhm. Yeah.
Have you made any of
And
the connections with Manal School here? I mean, they do a lot of international students.
I just today thought about that, and I was talking to Thomas Curry. And any of you know him? He was he was in Texas for many years as a pastor. He and I were just on the phone just now talking. Um, he doesn't know about Manal. He knows about some schools in Texas, but I do remember Manal, and I'm going to. Is there anybody in particular I could talk to there?
Yeah, let me pass along the information when we get off
Okay,
the Zoom call here. But yeah, I could put you in touch with some folks that might be able to give you some more information.
all right. I would like that because um, I think we're going to have two kids um, in Rabun Gap, which is in North Georgia. Um, it's a Presbyterian school there. Um, so in terms of high school, Manal would be great.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
we could definitely make that happen. Make those connections.
yeah, good. Bob, um, another question for you is, how do you maintain an image of peace when this war seems to be going on forever?
You mean like how do I personally, or I mean we as a
Yeah,
organization?
both personally and as an organization. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, frankly, you wouldn't know there's a war going on if you were walk out in the street here in Ismail, except for the sirens that you hear, um, 2 3 times a day. You really wouldn't know a war's going on. You can. I just passed all those buildings that were destroyed, back in the fall recently, but there hasn't been any more drones hit here since I guess since maybe December. Um, and people well, it's like I remember reading about London during the Second World War. They just kind of, as an air raid, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders, because your chances of getting hit are small, and you never think it's going to be you. Um, I can, I have a video I took of myself during a drone attack, and frankly, you don't think it's going to be you till the last few seconds when you hear that drone coming at you, and they're shooting at it like crazy, trying to with a AK-47s. A bunch of guys are out in a pickup truck trying to shoot that thing down as it's coming in. And then there's no stopping it because it's diving. And you're kind of like, dear God, and then boom, you made it.
Wow.
So it's like, I don't know, there's hours of boredom interrupted by moments of sheer fright, uh, that sort of thing. So it's not that we have to worry all the time about that, about maintaining an attitude of peace. I think that the mothers are worried about their children. They're worried about their children being afraid. So that's the point at which we have to think about what we do and what we need to do. So you walk in our center, um, you're going to get hugged 4 times.
Yeah.
It's just how it is, you know. I mean, the teachers that are there, the mothers that are there, I can't go there now because I have COVID, and so I have to just stay away. But every child that comes in gets embraced, and taken care of, and they're involved in doing things. So activity is really important, and these I have, oddly enough, I have 12 staff people. It's kind of funny because, 12 disciples, 12 months of the year, 12 magic number, but just ended up with 12. And these people, they're remarkable. They are, I just I've never had people to work with on staff like I have here. They, uh, they all care. They work really hard. They go beyond expectation. They're creative. Um, it's it's an environment that you die for, especially if you were a pastor of a church. I know what it's like to
Yeah.
be in a church. Not everybody always likes you and that kind of thing. You have to be so careful about what you say all the time. Um, Man, you come here and it's that would I would say that too right away. Come, get on a plane and fly over here. I've had several adults come into Ukraine.
You know what's breaking my brain that
Right.
you've talked about is, and I wasn't prepared for this, but you talked earlier about the first time you went to the Ukraine
Yeah.
15 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, and how there were these preteens and teenage young adults and kids that had no family or that were on their own.
Yeah.
And we're doing this series on peacemaking for Lent. That's why we wanted to contact you. And clearly the Ukraine is in a war, but your peacemaking work started before the war.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
identified the need for that kind of ministry and comfort and an oasis and a place for people outside of a war. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, we think of peacemaking as something you do in response to war, but it's not, is it? It's something you have, because you said something earlier about there's stress and there's economic problems, but there's always enough money for vodka, and
Yeah.
there's always someone in the house that can beat the rest of them up. Well,
Yeah.
that's a need for peacemaking.
Yeah.
That's a peacemaking issue right there in a family
Yeah.
unit.
Yeah. It is. It is.
It is kind of
You know,
incredible how it reframes all of that, that this is not about
Yeah.
some place that's far away. But I mean, when we look at the
yeah.
streets of Albuquerque, they probably look a lot like what you were describing when you went 15 years ago.
One day, interesting thing happened. I was underground because I spent hours and hours underground with these kids, and the manhole is covers above me, and it's nighttime. And they said because I know all these kids now. He said, Robert, go get some matches for us. And the word for matches is speechki, but the word for candle is svechki. And I wasn't really that good in Russian. And I went upstairs and I went to the little market thing, and I said, svechki. I said the word for candle instead of matches. And she said, how many do you want? I said, oh, I want a lot of them. And because I was thinking I was saying matches, and give me what we got. So she went and gets all the candles she has in a little cardboard box, and so I buy them all, and I go back now, and I'm so proud, I have all these candles, um, and and they look at it and they say, well, we meant matches, not candles, but we took these candles and we set them up underground and we lit them all, and it was remarkable. You're looking at this place underground, which is full of trash and pipes for water and sewage and all that. And there were candles everywhere. And it just dawned on me that, wow, here's a moment of peace. Um, and it's not that they have to actually get out of there and be in this nice home and all that kind of stuff. You can address the issue of peace right where you are. Um, this this woman with the book about cancer says, she says, you don't wait till you're well again. You have to learn to function in your life with where you are at the moment, um, and and start right there. So I think I think a lot of us, myself included, are waiting for that time down the road when we can really make it happen. But you got to look right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bob, one of the other pieces we wanted to ask is, given the reality y'all are facing and what's going on around you right now, how can we support your work from where we're at on the other side of the world? What you mentioned come, but what are other things that we could be doing to support the kind of peacemaking work that you're doing?
Well, first of all, the reason I'm asking you to come is because I feel at this time in history, I guess it is, I'm worried about the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine. I'm worried about financing and funding. I'm worried about um, all that, and the more people that come and see uh, and go back to the States, the better. Um, my specific needs, they're always for some financial support, but we're doing pretty well right now with that. I'm really happy, and I spent a lot of time on the road. Uh, I guess maybe you don't know, I've spent 3 months in Ukraine, then I spent 3 months in the States, then back to 3 months in Ukraine, 3 in the States. So for really 10 weeks out of the 3 months I'm in the States, I'm driving or I'm flying around the country. And I'm from Vero Beach, Florida to Seattle to New York to LA, and so many places between speaking. But I I the practical needs right now are some high schools for some kids, some colleges for some kids. Um, um, I would I would also look for people who have some kind of specialty that wanted to come over. I um, that would also be helpful. I look for um, let me ask you this question, because this would be helpful for me, because I am thinking about, on this trip in the States when I start in March, going to Presbytery offices. I mean, like 60. I've made a map of all these offices, and I know the names of the execs. I spent all this time online to get this information together and put together a schedule to do that, because I want to get to know the so they call them the exec or leader or whatever of the presbytery, and that could be a place where news could go out from that in their regular newsletter, whatever, about what Presbyterians are doing in Ukraine. I think I'm the only Presbyterian in Ukraine, minister in Ukraine. Um,
Mhm.
and I'd like to get that news out there. What do you think? Are these execs going to be, not want to see me, or bored with this, or are they going to be interested, or what do you think?
I mean, I think there would be interest. One of the questions I've got is, how does that become something more than a passing fad with a lot of those presbyteries, right? One of my questions for you, Bob, has been, I know that you're not like a mission coworker, and is that by design? Is that you made that as a conscious choice, or did
Yeah,
you try to do
yeah.
that and they didn't
Let me
support
tell
you,
you.
or what happened?
Let me tell you how that worked, because it's an interesting story. I'll make it short. But when I came back from Ukraine, I called Louisville. I said, I want to be your guy in Ukraine. And they said, there's no money. Raise $100,000 and give it to us, and then we'll pay you a salary, and your health. And I I I thought, oh, okay, I'll catch you later. Talk about this later sometime. I realized that all I needed to do was find 12 people or churches to give me $100 a month, and I could move to Ukraine, because I could live on $1,200 a month over there, pretty easily. And when I realized that, I was making a phone call to Betsy Lockhart. She's a pastor in Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Never.
She and her husband. You remember her?
Mm-hmm.
and, and her husband, he works with pharmaceuticals in IT, and she said, "Well, we got lots of money. We'll give you 200 a month." So, bingo, put your cards down. So, I started making phone calls. I quickly raised that money, and then, and well, I should tell you one more thing too before I tell you that when that started, is when the denomination said no. I went to the Peace Corps and I applied, and they gave me a position in Eastern Europe. And unfortunately, I was in my garage moving stuff for a yard sale to get ready to move, and I slipped a disc. The Peace Corps found out. They said, "Sorry, but you got to wait a year." And that's when I thought, "What am I going to do?" And my exec, Paige McWright, for Central Florida, said, "Why don't you go the validated ministry route? You know, present us with what you want to do. We'll approve it, give you permission to labor outside the bounds of the presbytery, and then you can go to Ukraine." So then I started the fundraising part, and soon I had the money committed to me. So that's how I ended up with the validated ministry. And I'm so glad I did that because I don't know. I wanted to stay ordained, which I have done, and that was important to me. And I wanted not only to be about helping in Ukraine, but I wanted to be also about kind of informing people in the States about what's going on in Ukraine or what's life is like in that part of the world.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So do you have a home presbytery in the States right now?
Yeah.
And who is that?
So it's Western North Carolina.
Really?
Yep.
My son goes to Western Carolina University near Asheville. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's a funny little connection. Seth, correct me if I'm wrong. I could be off base here, but it seems to me that a way to develop something maybe more lasting would be for Bob to find presbytery mission and outreach committees, like the committees that are, because so often they're local, but we don't have a lot of the, like, I'm fairly new here and I'm learning, but right out of the gate, anybody that's on one of those committees, and they'll have different names, I bet, from presbytery to presbytery and different structures. That's the drag. But they're going to have a meeting once a month, once a quarter, where they're going to get together for a while. And if you could be a guest at a meeting like that with 8 or 9 people that have been nominated and are focused on outreach, to me, that's a more intriguing thing in terms of a long-term goal. Because execs, as much as they change, and they're driven by different factors that might not be relevant to you.
Yeah. Yeah. My problem is traveling around. I can't time it to those meetings.
Yeah.
I would go to Presbyterian meetings if I could, but it's impossible really to make a trip around the States and stay on a trajectory around the States and that have that time itself with the meeting gatherings of presbyteries. I might go to 2 or 3 in 3 months, but otherwise, and I'm in a lot of churches too, but
Yeah.
I mean,
the thing about visiting the presbytery office is, it's all week, it's open. So you can go
right
every day.
what
Yeah.
I would say is that might be a good first step, is because it gives you access. But I would very quickly pivot from a presbytery exec to somebody in the presbytery that you meet when you get there. Because I think the same thing that you identified in talking about the problem with working through the denomination, doing mission coworker, and they're broke, and they are. I mean, the national denominational structure is just a freaking mess right now. And
it is.
And even the whole way that it used to work with execs and all that is so transitory right now that
right
I think most of the power in the church, and most folks don't realize this, is actually grassroots power. It has a
I
whole
agree.
lot of reach congregationally, and it just
Yeah.
takes making that connection with that one person who just sees this as their calling, kind of like your own story, and
Yeah.
just sees this as, wait, no, this is something I really feel called to do. And once you find that person in a presbytery, it becomes a whole thing. I mean, I'm thinking about, Santa Fe Presbytery. We've long had the connection with Cuba, and the Cuba Partnership Network that was started, years and years ago, and it was one person who started that and just found that as their calling and ran with it. And so even today, so many of our churches have partnerships with churches in Cuba as a result of that one person. But at the end of the day, the bureaucratic structures of the church are so overtaxed and such a mess that it might be a good way to get the conversation started. And to phrase it with that exec or whoever the person is, like, we don't have an exec. My wife is the closest thing to an exec. She's the administrator, which that's a whole
Yeah.
nother story. But once you get that initial meeting set up so that invite people from around the presbytery to come be a part of that, I would quickly pivot away from the bureaucratic structure of the church and move to a person who sees this as their story.
That's a really good point. And I think what I should do is ask the exec if he would invite that person or
Yeah,
somebody,
yeah.
because
If
I've
they
been
know who
thinking
that
mostly
is.
about, yeah, I'm thinking mostly about the newsletter, but now you're making me think more about a person. And you're right about that. It does need to be a person. And I often find that I get more attention from the secretary at the presbytery office than I would from anybody else,
Yeah.
and sometimes that person is key to what happens.
Well, and I know that
But
immediately after things happened February, what was that, 2 years ago?
yeah,
But I
22nd,
know
yeah.
immediately there were people in my congregation saying, what can we do to help? We don't know. And so there's definitely the drive out there. The problem is we don't always have the connection. And so I think that if you find somebody who's willing to hold that connection for the churches in a presbytery, you'll oftentimes find that there are
Yeah.
a lot of people who've been asking that question and haven't known what to do. And so they'll send their money to the Red Cross because that's one of the NGOs that they know they can trust. But it's not necessarily going to go to Ukraine, right? It's we've
Yeah. Yeah.
it's important for people to actually be able to answer that question. How can I actually make a personal impact? And I think that's something that your organization can do, and it's something that we can actually connect directly to.
Yeah. Um, I think one of the things that's difficult for me is to be able to convey to you um, what how really wonderful this is. Anna Carter Florence just wrote a book called A is for Alabaster.
Mm-hmm.
I recommend it. it's it's really kind of like, I mean, I'm not sure, I know Anna, so maybe I'll tell her this, but it's kind of like the Bible for people who don't go to church,
Mm-hmm.
who aren't interested in the Bible because of church or something like this, because it's so well written. And she has a chapter called L is for Lamentations. I confess I've never preached a sermon out of Lamentations. I
You and
know
me
it's
both.
but she said the most interesting thing. She talked about Lamentations being, as I thought it would be, a long monologue about sadness and grief and so forth. But what she said was that it's it's written within a community that's held together by, I don't know, skin and bones, in such a way that it allows the community to speak out without bleeding out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we're doing here. We built this net or whatever it is that we have made here, it's almost it's got a life to its own, but it's holding these people, and they are able to, speak and tell their stories and without bleeding out. Um, so I just found that to be a way to express what's going on, because we do all these different things with these people, and we have a psychologist that runs Sunday afternoons. It's 3 hours from 3 till 6 for mothers, and it begins with coffee and tea and crackers and some games, and then it goes into they sing some together, and then she has cards they pass out. They're called conversations cards, and the card looks like it's got a painting by Salvador Dali on it. So it's like, what the heck is this? So you hold it up and you say, I think this is about so and so, and how it relates to my life. So they go around the room, and there's 20 or 30 people that are in the room, uh, and they do that a couple of times and talking about themselves, and then they get out the plastic on the floor and art paper and stuff like that, and they start painting. Um, Sometimes she has them listen to music and close their eyes and paint with their eyes closed to the music. There's all these different things that she does with them, creativity. So some things are really well planned, but what it's doing is it's pulling all those women together um, into something that it reminds me of that book written by women on the island of Ometepe in Nicaragua during the 80s. They did Bible study together. They put together into a book. Here again is a situation in which women are being empowered, and women are really shaping now the culture of Ukraine, because the men are in the army, or they're laying low so they won't get drafted, or they're back home. They're not. I said to Olya, my
or they're
partner,
gone.
They're gone. Yeah, I said, let's get the men together. She said, oh, they'll never come together. They'll never gather anywhere. And so the women are out there running things now, in a sense, in terms of what's happening in culture. And this thing about, well, you don't know anybody and you're in your own little world, that's gone. Everybody knows everybody and shares with everybody now. Calls everybody when how are you doing, and how's your family doing after the rocket attack or whatever. So this Ukraine is changing.
Hey, this sounds like a weird question probably, but do you count that psychologist as part of your staff, or does she come in voluntarily, or how do you do that?
No, I pay her.
So she's one of your 12?
Yeah, the salaries are ridiculously low here.
Yeah.
So people are part-time also. So she just comes on Sunday afternoon for 3 hours, but we pay her. Yeah.
So the kind of the lead in for me is I'm trying to listen to what you're saying and not what I want you to be saying. And one of the things you're saying is that one of the most helpful things to you for what you do would be for people from here to go there. And of course my brain is like, haha, that's silly. That why would an American willing, but I'm talking to you and you did it. So if someone was to want to come to see what you do, what's a good length of time? How long would you want them to come? And what would their experience look like? What they land, they're picked up by someone in your community. Tell me about what someone coming to you would look like in your mind.
So first, because I've had several people come, Anderson Baker from New Orleans came. He's a businessman, just retired recently. He's in his 60s. He flew to Bucharest, Romania. This is how I get here too. He got on a train from the airport to the main train station. And then he got on the train from there to a town called Galati, which is in Romania, but it's near the border of Ismail, or of Ukraine. So you got to cross the Danube. So in Galati, we met him in a car and took him across the border. It's about another hour and a half to go from there to Ismail. He checked into a hotel here, which can be like $20 a night, $25 a night, a really nice one for $30 a night, that kind of thing. He stayed for 6 days, and he just spent his days coming to the center, uh, hanging out there because we're open 7 days a week, and we're open from 9 a.m. till 7 at night. And a lot of times we stay later because teenagers don't want to go home, um, and they're always there at the end of the day. But he saw programs for all age groups. You have to be here for a Sunday because this thing we do with mothers is a really, it's worth seeing and being part of. Um, and you got somebody with you that can translate, so you can hear what's going on and ask questions too. You spend some time walking around the city and just getting it, because this is a very clean, nice city. I mean, it is the cleanest city I've ever been in.
How do you spell that city? How do you spell
Izmail. I mean, you don't even see a cigarette butt on the sidewalk. It's that clean. They just take care of it. Every morning, there's an army of people out there picking up whatever, and people don't throw their trash on the street. So you see the city. You see. I mean, you're just taking a lot of stuff in. I've seen so much of it. It's kind of hard for me to distinguish about what would surprise you, but you learn a lot just by being here.
One other question related to that. What would you mentioned specialized people with training, specialized training? What are the types of specializations that you would love to see come out to help you, like that would be helpful to you, that you could employ as volunteers? They've come out, they've said, I've got training in this. Who are you looking for in that capacity?
Well, music therapy, art therapy, just someone who can look at a group of people and do some kind of assessment as to how well they're doing with their trauma.
So it's not a plumber. You're not looking for an electrician. You're looking for more sociological, therapeutic personalities to lead groups for a while.
Yeah, or someone that came with art supplies and we did stained glass windows, or someone who, any kind of craft stuff is good. Someone who's a musician. We a music club right now. We got 5 guitars and a piano, and we're singing 3 days a week in this group. And the funny thing is, they were singing these sad songs that were like Ukrainian, and the women were weeping, so they shifted to Hotel California.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Bob,
makes sense to me.
One of the things that you were saying that struck a chord with me, we work with another group, my church does, and the group's called Mountain Fund, and they're out of Nepal. And it's it sounds like a lot of similarities. It started very much working with children and women, and kind of from a microfinancing model where, giving these micro loans to women to start businesses, because as you've kind of pointed out, the men are off in so many other places, and when men get money, they tend to go off to the city and try to make it for themselves, but when women get money, they tend to reinvest it in their communities. And so they kind of started with a similar thing. And one of the things that they did, the guy who was the head of it is a guy named Scott McLennan, and he's our connection. His mother's a member of the church, and Scott had a lot of background in photography and videography. And so he started training women in that community to be videographers, because weddings are huge things in Nepal. And so one of the best jobs you can get is to be the videographer who can actually, record the whole wedding. And so he would go and empower these women to be able to be videographers and have their own business and whatnot. But the other thing that spun into was they do a lot of like recording the stories of people. And so like the idea that you were talking about the lamentations. And I just, in my mind, I see those would be so powerful. And having those to send off to somebody like in a presbytery office to distribute to churches, I mean, that would do wonders as far as people saying, no, this is my calling. I want to make a difference in this. And I'm amazed at how powerful it's been for our community when we've done some of this kind of work. And so that's one piece that go, steering straight into that lamentation, letting people tell their story so that their story gets heard, which becomes therapeutic for them. But also it becomes a way for people here to hear that story and say, no, this needs to be something I can make a difference about. I want to do something about this.
Was it videos that he recorded of people speaking?
Yeah. And one of the interesting pieces, like, if you remember the earthquake, I forget what year it was like 2017, somewhere in that area. They sent over a bunch of their videos around that time, and we ended up doing a benefit concert here at the church, and raising the funds to rebuild like 20 homes in this small village called Manku and a sister village, Gogunpani. And I mean, there was just so much power in those videos, and somebody actually had caught the actual earthquake on video in their community and sent that to us, and then lots of interviews with women in the community talking about how this made a difference. And actually the picture right here, this is Manku right here on my wall. They sent me a picture after we did all that work together. And it's, I mean, there's so much power in that. And so, and it's actually really feasible. It would be one of those things that, what he does every time he goes over is he hits the bargain bins at, Best Buy and gets whatever cameras that they have and just takes them over with him. So
is his dad, Don McClellan?
I don't know. I've never met his dad. His mom, Dale, was in this community long before, and I never met her husband, but it's possible.
I don't know. Maybe it's his grandfather. That Don McClellan is the guy that started Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't think that's the same one.
Wow.
No, but yeah.
Who I met back in 2004 or 5? No, 2005. Yeah.
Okay. Scott's dad would have shuffled off this mortal coil before then. So.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, that's a good idea too. Someone with video experience like that would be helpful. I find that it's just too many things for me to do.
Right.
The learning curve is too much. Right now, one other thing that we need right now is we need somebody who really understands how kids can apply for college and what to put on their resume and what colleges would be good to look at. I don't know that stuff. So I'm trying to learn it right now, but here again, there's something that we need. I've just today wrote some emails to people to see if they would help me with that.
We've also got a huge presence in our community of a lot of the students who go to UNM who are international students end up coming to church here. And one of the families has long been ahead of helping the international students sort of integrate in the community. So I could put you in touch with those folks too, and they might have some answers as to how to maybe apply to UNM or how to make some of those connections.
I wonder what it costs to go to a school like that if you're from another country. Is there, like, Florida has this out-of-state fee that's really high.
I think New Mexico does for the first year, but you can establish residency in the first year, and then the next semesters, hypothetically, if they came and established residency, then they can qualify for what's called lottery scholarship and basically have the rest of it paid for.
That's what you'd want to do.
Yeah.
You'd want to come here and work part-time. I don't know how visas would how the managing the visas for that would be, but that's what happened with my children, and it's a big difference. It's virtually free if you're a resident.
And that's why a lot of students go to Manal School first internationally,
right?
Because they can go to Manal School for a couple of years, establish residency in New Mexico, and that's not necessarily green card residency, kind of that it's different for statewide qualifications, but they come and they establish residency through Manal School, and then they can be eligible for lottery scholarship at UNM.
Bob, I'm divorced, and my kids were living in Alabama with my ex-wife, and they got residency through me living here. and my daughter's going to UNM for free.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, so if you can get a hookup with Manal or really anybody in the state, I mean, it doesn't have to be Manal. We know Manal, but there might be a couple others. You've got a track all the way through, like Seth is saying, that is absolutely doable. And the reason I bring that up is my kids were looking at Auburn and Alabama as in-state colleges in Alabama, and they wanted $30,000 a year for in-state. And
Wow.
here, my daughter didn't even live here, but I did. So she's got this opportunity scholarship, and she's paying zero tuition at all. So it's crazy how different that is. Absolutely crazy.
I would think that private colleges like my college, Alma College, which is Presbyterian related in Michigan.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I've spoken there.
Yeah.
I would think that for the good of the student body, they would love to have a Ukrainian student there to share their story.
Well, and
I would think so too.
I'm an alum of Austin College, another Presbyterian school, and they have long prided themselves on their international studies programs, and so I'd be willing to make a call there too.
I think getting a sponsor for some of these private schools would be all the difference, is having someone be able to say, I attended and I'm backing this person up. So yeah, the relationships would matter there, I would think.
Yeah, the trick is if they get accepted to a college, they get an I-20 and they can get a visa to come in. F1, J1, I forget which one it is, but they can't just come over here and get a job at McDonald's.
Right.
Come to the States.
Right.
You can't get a visa for that. So I got to find a way to get them connected to a certain school, so they're able to come. And
here it would just be the last year, Bob. Here it would be your senior year. So
high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in high school, I can't do a state school. Well, at Florida anyway, because you've got to be part of like American Field Service or one of these kind of agencies as a foreign student. You can't just come because someone invites you to come.
Right.
Private school, you can. But then if it's a private school, you need to have a dormitory. So Manal has a dormitory. Is that right?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Manal's story is that it expanded and became an international school about 10, 12 years ago. And they started using the dorms that had at one time been for like Hispanic families living in northern New Mexico who were sending their kids to Manal school. They repurposed them to be an international school, and they made some connections early on with China. And so a lot of students from China were the first students, and they started with 10, 20, and then it's grown. And so now I think when I last talked to them, it was something like 25 different countries represented at Manal, and like 50 students. And so I think there might even be some from Ukraine. So I'm not totally certain of that, but yeah, that would be a really good connection. I would certainly be able to give you some connections there and introduce y'all.
Yeah, I if you have a name, send it to me today. I can try and start and connect. That Rabun Gap School, I went to visit them. They have 50 different countries represented in the high school because they really got intentional about trying to but they don't have anybody from Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. I think these are all potential possibilities here, and I'll certainly also reach out to Austin and see what they have. If I know that that's always been a point of pride for that school, is having international connections and having a really highly rated international studies program. So,
yeah, Tom Curry I was talking to mentioned that school also, Austin. Yeah.
Well, Bob, what other things can we do to help? Are there other thoughts you got, or?
Well, I wish there were more people out there sort of speaking about Ukraine, and maybe there's a way I can give them something to say, or um, I kind of like would love to have myself duplicated in in some way around the country. It's just nuts to think about um, all the places to go, um, but you're right. It's about people and a person. Um, and if I had someone in each presbytery I'm connected with, that would be huge. If they could, if they only, if they didn't even know more than have some announcement, something written in the literature for that presbytery meeting for that particular day, and a way for churches in that presbytery to get information that way. Uh, I think Seth's right about what's happening in our denomination in terms of ground up, and so that's mostly why I've been dealing with certain churches everywhere. I started by just going to towns where I knew someone I could stay with, like my brother or friends from my church in Memphis area or friends here or there, whatever. So I did that in the beginning, and then I just started getting invitations to more places, and and more invitations because of the war, of course, also.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, Bob, I've got a spare bedroom. If you want to come to Albuquerque, you're welcome.
Thank you. I may take you up on that. When I was in
Okay.
Albuquerque this past October, I stayed with some friends from Farmington, and and her and her daughter, and her daughter works in Albuquerque, and she was in Farmington, but now she lives in Phoenix. But anyway, that was my sort of connection there, and I was at Emmanuel Church. I preached at Emmanuel.
Mhm.
Yeah, Drew is one of my close friends, and he was talking about how great your conversation with them was, and so yeah,
He's a great guy. I really liked him. I really, really like him. Wow.
he's
I love
amazing.
what they did with the sanctuary too.
Yeah,
I think that was so creative,
yeah,
what
oh
they did.
yeah, they're really onto something and doing some special stuff there. So
Hey, I've got a last question for you, Bob.
Yeah.
What is and the like? I'd love this to be like reflex. Like the less you think about this, the better I'll feel. But like, what is a project or a vision you have of something you have not yet been able to do that would be like, man, if we could only get over the hump and implement this program, or maybe it's a part of your program you'd love to build out more. Where's the gap that you'd love to fill? And it may be that the war is keeping that from happening, but it may be that it's money or staffing. What's something you'd love to see happening with your group that you're stalled at?
God, that's a really good question. It's, I mean, I'm thinking about my work in the States, my work here, our work here with people. Well, one is, and I'm not sure how you could possibly help with this, but I I would really like to duplicate what we do in Ismail and make it happen in Kherson, in Nikolaev, in another city
Yeah.
like Uzgorod. I'm staying out of Odessa. It's I spent a long time in Odessa, but it's nicer working with smaller cities. But I've already talked to Olia, my program manager, about that. We have the money. We could start one of the place. We just we have to find the right person, and that's important. But I also need. I feel like I need somebody in the States. I need I need somebody else who is really interested in what is happening in Ukraine, and I would love for it to be someone who's ordained, even if they didn't come over here full time. If they were maybe working at a church with this kind of work, but they were also interested in Ukraine. If, um, uh, I have a young woman here. She's 36, 35, and she's talking to me about seminary, and I would love to see her go to Columbia Seminary or Austin or whatever. Her English is fairly good, not excellent. She's a wonderful human being, just wonderful. And but she's unfortunately stuck with the model of ministers in Ukraine, which is you tell everybody what to do and you shout a lot. So, you know, it is the typical, well, not the typical, but it's one style of
Sounds great to me. That's what I do every Sunday.
Protestant non-denominational church is what she goes to. You know, like everybody else, she was Orthodox, and then she left that, and then she was Baptist, and then she left that and joined the growing thing, which is all these Protestant evangelical churches that are non-denominational. And I go to those things sometimes, and they're great. I mean, good people. So, but so I look at her and I think, wow. Or I look at the student that came here from college. He's the son of Presbyterians, and maybe one day he would want to come back here, because there needs to be somebody in the States as well as the people over here. And if I ever in my time here, then who's going to take over?
Right.
And started in other cities. It might be good if we had an American there that's connected with churches in the States, and so can raise funds and also talk about what they're doing, and have that relationship.
Yeah, that's a good answer. That makes sense to me. Like, if you could grow your footprint over here, it would necessarily grow your footprint there. You know, if you could invest time in, like you're doing, meeting people over here, developing relationships, it wouldn't take a ton of them. You'd want to grow deeper than you would wide, maybe. But yeah, that makes sense to me. That answer does.
And I have to pick a city, probably Kherson. I mean, I've said that word. You don't know these cities at all, but it's not far to the east. It's also called the watermelon capital of Ukraine. So they have watermelons on their flag. But it's a very kind group of people that live there. I mean, that's the attitude you get from talking. And I would need someone who's part of our program here, so they're experienced with it, and a mother who's sharp and capable, who's from there, who can go there and start it. Then I need some connection to the States.
That's good.
Bob, thank you so much for making this time for us. And, we'll all follow through and send our connections and whatever we can do to help on that front, and do what we can to mobilize some of our folks to try to help support the work that you're doing. It sounds so important.
And I look forward to seeing you in the spring. So my plan is to, come through Albuquerque at some point. I don't have a date yet, but this is great, because now I'm connected with more people there, and I've always had the strong connection to Farmington, but never with Albuquerque so much. So,
well, now you do. So, yeah, let us know. Like I said, my wife's the administrator for our presbytery. I'm sure that she can pull strings and get you in wherever you want to get in.
I wonder if she got my email. I sent an email out to all these presbyteries.
Probably.
But I can't remember.
Tiffany Lowe Finch.
Oh, she did. Yeah. I know the name. Yep. So, I know the name.
I'll make sure she's aware of it, and that you're coming sometime in the spring, and we'll try to do what we can to make sure that you have connections here.
All right. So a name from Anal, a name from Austin Seminary, or Austin's College, rather.
I can do that, and I could also do Austin Seminary. Actually, I'm in the process of starting a DMin there. So.
Oh, okay. That's great. That's great.
Well, cool.
All right. It's great being with you. Thank you for spending your time with me. I really like talking about what we do and just bouncing ideas.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, man.
And just to let you know, just to give you a heads up about, we've recorded this conversation, and our intention was to use this in our churches on, I believe we were saying the 20, or is it 25th? The 25th of, and so we're gonna, I'll edit the conversation to get it to a sermon length, and then on the 25th, all three of our churches are gonna see this in place of the sermon. And if you want, I can send you Covenant's YouTube link, and you can watch the conversation on YouTube when it
Oh,
goes
wow.
live.
Oh, that would be great. And the other two churches, I didn't catch. Did you send me the names of the other two churches?
Yeah, I'll get your email from Seth, and I'll email you the info.
Yeah.
It may be that you want to see what all three of us have done with your remarks and kind of play with that a little bit. So I know we're on YouTube and Facebook as well. So yeah, that might be useful. But I'll get it from Seth. I'll get your digits and contact info from him.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Seth, Jeff, and I see your email there, GKUYK. Don't have your name, but just
Yahoo. At Yahoo. I'm Jerry.
okay.
I'm Jerry with
right.
a J, but I'm Gerard officially.
I got you. All right. Thanks again. It's great talking
Thank
with
you,
you.
Bob.
Thanks so much.
Enjoyed it a lot.
Take care.
All right. Bye
Blessings to
now.
y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.